everybody, and welcome to another Thursday. I am Saxon, your host. Let me make sure my sound is on so we don't have another disaster there. Yes, sound is going. All right. Welcome, everybody. Today is Basic Cameras. Let me pull up the presentation there. Boom. Welcome to Camera Basics. It is the first Thursday of the month, so we all know what that means. Today's a very basic class, as always. I have one student present today, so glad to have that, and I know I'll have multiple viewers signing on in a little bit. But Camera Basics, we go over the very basic information on cameras. I will give you a light tour of the camera. We're going to talk about the automatic setting the most today, how to shoot through the image, framing techniques, the rule of thirds, different ideas that you can employ while you're shooting that'll make your photos look a little bit better before we move into intermediate, where you're going to have more of your the aperture, your shutter speed, your ISO, where you have all three of those controls. We talk about manual settings. That's all in intermediate. Camera Basics, we're going to get into the real easy beginner information that everyone should know and learn. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So, first case scenario, where do you go for help when all else fails? My first, foremost, and beginning thing, and the most important thing that I tell people about is always, always, always read the owner's manual before you actually use the thing. So many questions, so much confusion comes out of customers and people who buy their first camera who don't look at all the fine details, and I know that sometimes the book can be an inch or half an inch thick, but just try to flip through it a little bit, read it, understand your camera, get a basic foundation of the layout and everything else before you really jump into the next, or before you start assuming that there's problems with your camera or unit. YouTube is also great too. I have so many people that come in that they're very visual learners, so they don't bring their camera, or they come in, they ask a question, I don't have, certain pieces to help them out. I then can usually give them like a YouTube video or two, and that usually will solve the problem. So I definitely always recommend YouTube as a great resource as well too. And then Masterclass, that's one that I like as well. If you're not familiar, it became really popular during the pandemic. It was a way for people who were, let's say, masters at their work, or they were the most experienced. People would make classes and kind of teach you a light tutorial of how to do things on there. So always, before you do anything, when all else fails, read the owner's manual, check on YouTube, and if you're adventurous, look at the Masterclass. They've got a lot of good information, especially on the Photoshop and the Adobe side of things, and filming. If those are all things that you're interested in, definitely worth checking out. Hello there, welcome in. We just started about a minute ago, so you didn't miss much. Literally, this was the first slide. So we have 2 people in class today, everybody. So as always, when I teach obviously to my students here, and then I have a live stream going for our YouTube as well too. So all the videos are online, people can chat in to ask questions, and then you guys can stop me at any time and ask any questions you got. So the next thing we'll talk about is where do your pictures go after you take them, and you make sure you have 2. SD cards is what we're going to be talking about next. So for most standard cameras out there, you're going to have an SDXC or SDHC. Both of the cameras that you have would use the standard SD card. For some of the more advanced cameras, like let's look at the you've got the Z9, you've got the R5, you've got Sony's Alpha 7R Mark V. Those types of cameras would use something called CF Express. CF Express is a bigger card, it's a little bulkier. If, let's say, the regular SD card is the size of this bottle cap, the CF Express card would be maybe the size of 2 of my fingers together. So it's a significantly wider card, has a better read and write speed, it's a little larger. It works better for raw images or raw videos. Neither of your cameras would support something like that, so you don't have to concern yourself. But if you are someone out there who buys one of these more, say, advanced or heavier duty cameras, CF Express is what you want to be looking at. Now, As far as SD card goes, the main important things to be looking at here is gigabyte size. You can go as low as, I've seen 4 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256. I typically would recommend, if you're just taking photos, 64 is perfect. That's enough information for you to probably get about 10,000 or so photos. If you want to take any type of video, if you have a camera that's video capable and that's something you're interested in, I'd say 128 is a good way to go, especially if you're shooting in a 4K or in a higher resolution. 128 at 4K video, you're probably at about an hour and a half worth of footage. So about for every 1 gigabyte, you're probably looking at, I'd say, a little over a full minute of footage when you think about it and you break it down. But again, it's all dependent on the SD cards you get. It's dependent on the footage that you're filming and the quality of that footage. The other thing to look at would be the read and write speed. As you look at some of these SD cards, you will see speeds like 70 megabytes one next to one, 280 next to the other. That is the speed at which it reads and writes at. It's important when you're doing things like video to get something that's a little bit of a faster speed card, because you have that information that you want to make sure gets transferred to the computer effectively and fast. If it's standard photos, you really don't have to worry too much about that. It all just kind of comes down to the more advanced that you're being with the camera, the more advanced of an SD card that you should be getting. The more bare bones you are, the more simple that you can go with. Have two. That last part of there. I have had it so many times where I've gone out with one SD card and something's failed, it's not reading the images, it's not processing right, and I've had to put another SD card in, or if I've been really SOL, I don't have any SD card and I gotta go home. I don't have any other options. So I always recommend, if you're out and about, have another SD card with you. It's better to have more than one than just have the one and have it fail on you. I say the same thing for batteries too. You should always have at least one extra battery with you when you go out, just to be on the safe side if one of these dies. But if a battery is not the thing you want to carry around, at least have that second SD card. Keep it in your backpack, in a wallet, a purse, somewhere where it's easily accessible, just in case the other one doesn't work or the other one fills up quickly. This is one of my favorite quotes to add, and I love doing this during the camera class. The bitterness of a poor quality remains long after the sweetness of a low price is forgotten. Photography is one of the few art forms that I make the claim that money is king. The more money that you can put into your camera, whether it's the lenses or the batteries or the SD cards, the better off in the long run you'll be. Camera equipment is all based on quality for price. Functionality, yes, but I would say the big thing that you're paying for is the quality of the camera. The lenses are the most important thing to invest in. Your body should be secondary. I think we talk a little bit more about that later. If not, I do in the intermediate class. But always keep that in mind. As you're going and shopping for accessories, if a better accessory is $100 or $200 more and you can swing it, but you're debating on saving that money, I probably would push you to swing for that higher end one. In the long run of things, it will work better, it'll perform better, it'll last longer, and as my quote likes to point out, it's that poor quality that comes from a sweet price sometimes that then can be forgotten as soon as you realize how bad it actually is. So keep that in mind. Your picture shouldn't live on your memory card. You should, as a photographer, have multiple places to store these. A lot of the times I get people who come in and they'll buy 10 SD cards, and when I ask them about it, they're like, oh, I don't delete any of my information, I keep it on the SD card. And I think it's silly to do that, because at the end of the day, your SD card isn't like a roll of film where it's a one-time use, you develop it, and then that's what you get. Your SD card is meant to be reused and repurposed. So one of the steps, or the steps I like to go about it, is first things first, turn off your camera. You wait 5 seconds and then physically remove the SD card from the camera. Now, you can use your camera to read the pictures and to send the pictures from the camera, but I really don't recommend doing that. And I think of it as multiple points of contact. When you think about it, if you have your camera and it's plugged into your computer, your camera is communicating with the computer via a cable. If for any reason, let's say you spill water everywhere and that damages the camera, you could possibly disconnect or disrupt the connection that's between the camera and the computer. You could lose all your images while transferring. Let's say someone accidentally comes by and a grandkid or the kid unplugs your camera as a joke and you're transferring images over. You could lose all your images and your videos that way. If the camera for any reason malfunctions while you're doing that, that's another thing that could happen that could damage or destroy the SD card. Very unlikely, but the unplugging is a common occurrence that can happen. So I would be cautious of that. Removing the SD card, now you've got the SD card plugged into the computer. So now there's only one point of contact, and that point of contact being the computer, being your thinking machine that's doing all the work of storing the photos, keeping the quality correct, transferring everything over. There's less in between the camera and the computer that could screw up. So you should be able to get everything over in one foul swoop, no harm, no foul. So I always recommend to remove the physical card from the camera, place it into the card reader. If you have to use the camera with the cable to plug things in, by all means, but it's, in my opinion, not preferred, just in case something goes wrong with the camera or with the transfer. You can use your camera to send pictures to your phone. That is really popular nowadays. A lot of the newer cameras, not sure the age of yours, but a lot of the newer ones do have Wi-Fi Bluetooth built into them. And with that, you can download an app on your phone. Let's say, there's 20 really awesome vacation photos you took. You didn't bring a laptop, you didn't bring an iPad, you didn't bring any of the stuff that you need to transfer the photos. You just brought the camera. You can sit there and transfer a bunch of photos to the phone, and you can do as many as you want. The only downside is it'll eat the battery life up of the camera tremendously. So I only recommend do 10 photos at a time, 20 photos. If you're doing more than that, you might as well just plug into the computer and then do the rest of the work. Great if you're on vacation, you're with friends, you're with family, and they're like, hey, I want to see I want some of those photos right away. Real easy. Send them to your phone, take them from the phone, text them to everybody. Everyone's got their photos. I think that's the big push with the camera versus the cell phone game. We were talking a little bit about that before you came in, but I think one of the biggest things that people love about the phone and the camera on the phone is that immediate gratification. You take a picture on the phone, now you have the power to not only look at the photo, but you can do whatever you want. You can email it, text it, you can Dropbox it, you can post it, you can put it on your Google Drive, you can do whatever you want with it. With the camera, typically you wait until you get home and then you can do whatever you want with it and then go from there and then send stuff to the phone. So if you got Wi-Fi Bluetooth on the camera, it's definitely worth using. Just be aware that it'll destroy that battery life. Card readers, these are good examples. You can go, the ones on the right are going to be my CF Express cards, so those are going to be my little more heavy duty ones. You only need that if you've got one of those heavy duty cameras that requires the CF Express. If you don't, I recommend either of the two on the left. ProMaster's a great brand. They make great products for the cost. I'd say they're the value brand out of the bunch, but a good third party. Their Trifecta is my personal favorite. It's got 2 ports on the side, one for regular SDs, one for micro SDs, and then it ends in a USB-A or USB-C, so you can insert it into nearly any type of computer. But then same thing on the left, you've got another version of that, and then the cool thing is that it's got USB plugs on the side, so when this is plugged into the computer, you technically can charge 3 other devices at the same time. So nifty depending on your shooting style, or if you're out in the field and then you come back in and you want to charge your gear up. But I definitely think that everybody should have a card reader and not use their camera to transfer the images. It's another accessory, yes, but in the long run, it should be a better transfer and a more smoother transfer than having to plug your physical camera into the computer. So don't lose your pictures or damage your card. Copy photos to a destination folder. Don't move them, copy. Use Windows or Mac, use Explorer or Finder. When I say don't move them and I say copy, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll take everything from the SD card and they'll try to move it over. And when you do that, same idea of having the camera connected to the computer. If for any reason during that transfer something goes wrong, you're taking the photos and you're moving them from a location to the other location. So they're traveling through the SD card into the innards of the computer. if something gets disconnected, let's say you unplug the SD card, the chances of you transferring everything in that time frame are probably slim to none. So you probably, maybe, let's say you have 200 photos, you got 50 over, somebody unplugs it, they only got to 50. It didn't get all the way up to 200. It didn't get all the information that it needs. There's a good chance you're going to lose that other 150 photos that didn't transfer over if you're moving them. If you're copying that, if you're making an exact replica on the computer and you just copy that over, what you're doing is you're telling the computer to make a duplicate of what's already existing. And if that thing that's transferring the photos to the computer is unplugged, it shouldn't delete anything on its own because it was making a copy or a duplicate of that. So what you're doing there is you're protecting yourself in case something were to become unplugged or something becomes undone while you're transferring the photos. Again, the idea is that we're trying to limit the amount of error that can occur when getting the photos from the camera to its secondary source, the computer. And then you want to make sure that you're copying those to another place. So external drive, Prime Photos, Google Drive. I am a huge proponent of the external drive. I don't have a problem with Prime Photos. It's free if you have Google or if you have Amazon. If you subscribe to Prime, you get Prime Photos. Unlimited photo storage space. You can organize by folders. You can do everything, and it's cloud. So if you sign in Chicago, let's say you go to Botswana to take photos, if you got internet access over there, you can sign in and you can access all the photos that you took. That means you can download off your computer, get them out, or from the camera, get them onto the computer, and then you can access them literally anywhere you want in the entire world. So using a cloud-based solution is a really great idea. But like I said, I like the external drive. I like having things. So for me, having that little external hard drive, I'm like, I know where it's at. It's safe. It's in one spot. I don't have to remember passwords or anything goofy to get into it, so I like that. I'm a big proponent of making sure that you have 2 locations, and I think that I talked about that before I talk about that. Eject the card before you physically remove it. So you've copied all your photos in, you've got them on the desktop, and you've got them in a cloud-based solution or an external hard drive. You're done with your photos, you've done everything on there. Now you want to remove the card from the camera. Don't erase the card in the reader. And the reason why is because when you put it back into the camera and you hit format the card on the camera settings, it'll delete all the images for you. What you're doing when you format the card to the camera is you're allowing the card to read the actual, let's say, tech specs, that there are the spec numbers, those arbitrary numbers that I would say really nerdy photographers would love and know very well, but to the regular everyday person it just looks like a jumble up of numbers. The SD card can read that information, that metadata from the camera, and it can format itself so that way it's optimizing the SD card to the camera. So what I like to say is don't delete the photos on the card itself on the computer, just insert the card back into the camera, go to the settings, format the card. It should delete everything on the card and leave the card primed and ready to go for that specific camera. Definitely worth doing, saves you time on the computer. I think, yeah, it'd be a good idea to do that. Yeah. So eject the card before you physically remove it from the computer. On Mac, if you take the card and you drag it over to the trash can, that'll eject it. On the Windows, if you go to the bottom right corner, it's next to the volume button, you can click and there should be a section where you can then eject the card. Always eject the card first, because what that'll do is it'll stop whatever information is going from the card to the computer and then allow you to safely remove it without accidentally deleting anything on there. Just in case you are saving images or you want to give somebody else the SD card. Let's say there's 10 photos on there you don't want to delete. If it's not finishing transferring or it's not finishing loading the information onto the computer and you go to pull the SD card out, you could lose those images. So again, goal is to just make sure we minimize the chances of us losing all our hard work. Backup plan. So this is what I was referring to. I think that you need to at least have 2 out of 4 of these storage solutions. So first storage solution, if you really feel like you need to, you can keep the images on the SD card and you can keep buying new SD cards. I don't recommend doing that. I think it's a waste of money. I think you're better off getting a hard drive and then saving the images to there, deleting everything on the SD card, and continuing to reuse it, like a reusable film, if you will. But what you should be doing is SD card to computer. Everything that's on the computer then should live there, but then it should go in one of the other two places. So either an external hard drive, something hard, it's there in front of you, you've got it all times, or a cloud-based solution, something you can log into, sign into, wherever you're at, and you can really manipulate and do whatever you want with it. For me, I do use Google Photos. It's not my favorite. I really don't like it that much. I have 2 hard drives. One that I keep next to my computer desk. That's my everyday user. I go on, I sign in, I'm able to delete photos, take photos, do whatever I want with it. I also keep another hard drive in a safe under my bed. God forbid my house ever burns down or anything ever happened to my stuff. I've got almost 30 years worth of artwork on my hard drive from all of my years of making stuff since I was a kid, through my days in high school, through college, and now into my adulthood. I don't want to ever lose that work. If I ever did, I'd be devastated. So if something were to happen and my hard drive next to my computer were to go, at least I also have one still in my safe, good, and it's safe. So would definitely recommend at least 2 different storage. If you're choosing the computer as one, you should have one other location. One of these 3. If you can use all 4, you're even more protected. Cloud-based solutions, though, are great, and I do recommend them if you're not an external or if you don't like having clutter and having extra technology laying around the house. There's Prime Photos, which I don't have an example of. There's Google Photos, which is the top left corner. Great, you got My Drive. If you have a Gmail, you already have access to it. OneDrive is done through Microsoft. I've never used it per se, but I've heard good things. My favorite of all time, though, is Adobe Creative Cloud. You pay monthly for it. You get access to Photoshop and all the apps, but the thing that I love about it the most is that when you go to put stuff in your cloud, you can also activate an online gallery where people can come and look at your work. And what's cool about it is one of the things that I miss about college and I miss about being in art school was we would have critiques. You put up a piece on the wall, everybody sits around, and rather than just say, oh, it's good, I like it, or I don't like it, like, silly adjectives that don't give description, we would sit there and we'd say why we don't like something. What is it about the piece that's making us feel one way or the other? Or we might ask technical questions. Do you like how I painted this, or do you like how I photoshopped this? The same thing can be done on Adobe Creative Cloud. You can set a gallery up, post your favorite work that you've been making, and then from there, there's chats underneath, and people can comment on your work and either give it a thumbs up or tell you what they liked about it, or you can, put a prompt on there. What do we think of? Let's say you have a picture of the butterfly. What do we think of the color of the wings? Did I touch that up right? People can then go and say, oh, I like that, but maybe you could have done this better. Or I really like this, I think that's a strong point, and I think that maybe in the future you should jump from that. So Creative Cloud gives you a really fun kind of artist community to build off of and learn and see what others are doing, to compare to yourself and to push yourself as a photographer or as an artist. So let's go through a tour of your camera. Now for you guys, this is going to probably make the most sense because what I have, the pictures, are very similar to the cameras that you have. For some of my viewers at home who have maybe the newer, let's say the mirrorless series, or maybe a Sony camera, this might be a little bit different for you, but the general basis is the same. All of these buttons exist on cameras, whether it's old or new. Some of the buttons are inside the actual menu system where you touch through the screen or through the pin pad. Others are loitered throughout the whole camera. You'll see buttons on every little corner and nook and cranny of the camera. So without further ado, let's start at the very top of the camera with our video start and stop. Typically somewhere on the camera you're going to see a red dot. That is your video start and stop. Now on the physical dial you should also see another camera settings that is a more advanced camera setting. If you're just ready to take a picture, point the camera, start, maybe you want to do a video, you've got the video start and stop button available so that you can do it kind of at a moment's notice. Power switch, that is your switch. Usually the trigger or the shutter release is in the center of that. That's your on and off button. Turn it one way, you'll hear a click. Turn it the other way, you'll hear the on, or you'll hear it go on and off. Shutter release is in the very center of that, or if it's not in the center, it might be off to the right side. But typically, where the grip for the camera is, you will see a shutter release at the very top of it. That's your bread and butter for actually making this thing go, take the image, and work. Mode dial is below that. Oh, sorry, exposure compensation. You'll see this little box, and it's going to have a plus and a minus symbol on there, and it should be half white, half black. Exposure compensation is your camera's ability to compensate itself based on the exposure that it notices outside, or where you're taking your pictures. If the camera notices that things are dark, it'll naturally become a little bit lighter, and you can actually manipulate the control of the exposure compensation by turning that dial to get it to go more for the light or for the dark aspects, depending. Mode dial is underneath that. Mode dial is pretty self-explanatory. That's your modes. That is your different settings that the camera can do. You have things like automatic, manual, aperture, shutter, programmable, scene. You have effects. You have no flash, flash. You've got a bunch of different dials. Everybody's is a little bit different, and it's kind of funny. You both have a Nikon and a Canon. A lot of the times I have people with the same cameras who come in. So you have two opposite sides of the spectrum to kind of get an idea of where you're at. Both are very similarly designed, just little differences here or there.
Does it make all the difference, or is it just
You know,
preference?
it's just preference, honestly. I mean, all the cameras do the same thing, and I tell people all the time, it's when you really get down to it, spec-wise, there are certain cameras that will overperform others. They're going to do things that some cameras don't even touch. But for the majority of it, Nikon is big for their tracking system. People love the tracking features in Nikon. Eye tracking, animal tracking, human tracking, cars, planes, trains, automobiles, all of it. It tracks really well. People love Canon because Canon's color is just unbeatable. The coloration on a Canon camera is phenomenal. I think for the majority of it, Canon is kind of like the Apple of cameras. They're considered the top dog. Sony is very particular on the video aspect. Video has become a huge part of the camera person's day-to-day life, especially in the vlogging era, YouTube, you got all this stuff. So the Sony cameras take some of the best video, very similar to like a full-on movie camera. It's really powerful what it can do. Then there's other brands like Fujifilm, Olympus, Panasonic, a few other ones that are slipping my mind right now. Those are fun cameras. They're more novelty. They really take what the basis of cameras are and add more volume to kind of the pool. Some people really like Olympus cameras because they have really cool flip-out displays and some effects on the inside. I like my Fujifilm because it has a rangefinder on the side. That was what drew me to it. So everyone's got their different purpose for it. As far as these buttons and the layouts go, if you don't see it on the physical side of the camera or on like where we're talking about, most likely it's inside the menu of the physical camera.
But when I had film, you know, it was either 100 or 400.
Yeah.
And then if it was fast, like a train or something fast, you put it on 1,000.
Yep.
But now with digital, it's so much different. So I don't know if the settings are only say it's, you know, it's a manual MAS or P. So is that? But if it's in the middle, is that that's where it should be all the time?
So it's all dependent. The class that with what we're teaching here in class, I would say automatic is definitely the way to start with. Automatic's the green button, or you'll see a camera symbol with a little plus next to it. Automatic's a good one because it's a way for the camera to do all the work. All you do is point and shoot. Great when you're first starting off to get a feel for how the lens works, the frame of or the view of focus that you have, that sort of thing. Once you get more advanced, I usually tell people that shutter or aperture priority is the best thing to go with. A manual's fine, but I only think you need it so much. aperture priority will control the physical aperture, and that's the only thing that you're controlling with the camera. Everything else the camera dictates for you and does. And in the shutter, it's the same idea. It's going to control, or you control how fast you want those shutters to go, and then the camera does the rest of the work. Great, they just have different purposes. Personally, I shoot in automatic almost all the time. That's the only thing I do. I let the camera do all the work for me because I trust my camera. I have all the settings the way that I want it, the white balance, the grain, the saturation, the hue. I've set all those to my specifications. I can trust that my camera, when I point and shoot, will take a really great photo. So mode dial, that's where you can toggle between all the different things that we were just talking about. So automatic, video, shutter, all that sort of thing. Live view mode is, so when you pull on the live view mode, depending on where you start at, you'll notice that your LCD screen on the camera will be on. And when you pull that live view again, or you push the live view again, you'll notice that the LCD screen goes off. That is to switch the camera from only using the viewfinder to using the viewfinder and the screen. You can use both at the same time. It eats the battery life up a little bit more, but some people prefer it because they can start by looking through the eye hole, and they can pull it down and then look through the screen. So you have two options. Underneath that, then you have the command dial. Now the command dial really won't be a feature in automatic, but when you're in things like shutter priority or aperture priority or manual, the command dial, depending on what other amount of corresponding buttons you're holding down, the manual command dial will start to actually go through and change those settings. So you can change your aperture with the command dial. If you hold down the OK button and you start turning the command dial, that might change your shutter speed, that sort of thing. Again, when you're doing a priority of some sort, like an aperture or shutter priority, a command dial will come into effect. If you're using automatic, it won't. And if you're using full manual, the command dial will control all of them. You'll basically just hold down a key of buttons without having to fiddle. It's going to do all the work for you. You point, you shoot the camera, it takes a clean image. In the later class, in the next class, more of the other features on there. But when you're looking at it, the A+ is your intelligent auto. You're going to see a P or a PE on the camera. That's program auto. Program auto is pretty cool because you can basically have it manual where you're doing certain things. You're doing certain things and you're setting certain things on purpose. But then let's say about whatever it is, it'll read the room. You can set ISO to be automatic and you're controlling your aperture and your shutter. You can set your shutter to be automatic, but you're controlling your aperture and your ISO. If you really wanted to, you could set it so that you're only controlling your ISO, but you can do that in other settings, so it's really not necessary. But program gives you the ability to do it however you want it to be, set it that way, and when you bump to a different dial mode, let's say you go back to that program, it'll always be what you left it off at. So it'll always stay programmed to whatever you set it as.
And that's the A
The P.
or the P.
The P. Or the PE. Some cameras will do it differently. The A+, the camera does all the work for you. You don't do anything, you just point, shoot the camera. Program gives you a little bit more flexibility, control, because you can set things to be automatic, but then you can set things to make you do all the work as well. So you can mix and match. Shutter priority gives you control over only the shutter. So you control manually the speed of the shutter, but then the camera controls everything else. Aperture is going to do the same thing. You control the physical iris of the camera and how big or how small it can go, but then the camera will do the rest of the work. Manual exposure, you control everything. Bulb's a weird one, but back in the day when you would take a photo, you'd get this really obnoxious light that would shine. You'll see that classic thing where the old photographers, they would throw that little like cloth over their head and they'd hold that thing up and then it would just flash. That's what bulb is supposed to stand for. The idea is long exposure. I don't know if I have any examples in this. I know I do in the next class. But in the bulb settings, let's say you're by a waterfall and the light is consistent, there's no moving animals or objects, it's just the water that's coming down. You could set the camera in a bulb, and what that'll do is it'll keep the shutter open for as long as possible. You control when you basically click it, the shutter would be open, and when you click it again, the shutter will close. You can do a 2-minute, a 3-minute, a 4-minute exposure on the camera. That would give it the most detail ever. You could zoom in so far and that image would come out so sharp. If there's even a little bit of movement, the photo will look off. So a tripod's required for it or some form of stabilization. But bulb is a really cool feature to use for long exposure shots is the moral of the story there. Most people don't do it, but if you ever do need to do a long exposure, bulb is what you're looking at. And to go back through it, so auto, A+, that's auto control over settings and functions of camera. M, full manual control over the camera's array of functions. A or AV, aperture priority control. S or TV is your shutter speed control. I haven't figured out what T stands for that. I don't know why they just don't say SV, but that's beyond me. If anybody knows, please chat. I think I've mentioned this before. I refuse to Google it, but if anyone knows, they can chat it. Program, aperture, shutter, and speed are all auto, but everything else is changeable, or you can then change to make the aperture and shutter and ISO non-auto, and you can do it manually if you want. And then B, the camera's fully customizable, but as long as you're holding the shutter release, the camera will stay open. So bulb is for your long exposures. Some cameras will require you hold the button. Other cameras, it'll be one click, it'll stay open, second click, it closes.
Say I got YouTube, what will I have to write in order to get to where you
So just go to Apt Electronics on our YouTube page, or just go to Apt Electronics on YouTube, click on the page, and then the first thing you see on there should be that we're hosting a live stream video. And then if you click on it, that's me. all of my intro students, anybody who comes to this class, I can't stress enough, just stick with auto for now. Auto is going to be your main defender against taking bad pictures. I get a lot of people that try to do manual right off the bat, and they complain about their camera more than anything because they just don't know how to fully use it yet. If you learn how to use auto, you learn that info button, you learn the layout of the camera, you're going to learn real quick and pick up real quick what your camera is dictating to make the best images possible, which is something I really like about the auto button, and then using that info button. It's a great source. Now, using the scenes is also like using auto. Now, some of your cameras might have this. You guys might, yours have those. Scenes is basically automatic, but a specialty automatic. So if you go through, you've got your A+, that's your automatic mode. Now, when you go down below it, that's auto, but that's no flash auto. So no matter what type of day that you're in, let's say night, day, overcast, it's cloudy, you're in pitch black, the camera will not throw up its flash no matter what. So that's if, let's say, you're out and you kind of got an overcasty day, the camera keeps putting up the flash, but you don't need it. The image just looks fine without the flash. A lot of the times, if you try to hold the flash down on your camera and pull the trigger, it'll give you an error message. It'll say that the camera is blocked, it can't perform. You would then switch to the non-flash button, and that would take care of your problem. Automatic settings, no flash. Underneath that, I always forget what the CA stands for. I don't see it on a lot of cameras anymore, but I forgot what the CA stands for. That's my apologies. But going underneath that, the face is for portrait. The face is for more of a close-up shot. It's going to do heavy details. It's meant for things that are maybe shoulder width or up. It's meant for that detailed picture of a still person. That's what you're thinking about when you're doing the face picture, or the face symbol. The mountain symbol is for landscapes. That is going to be for pictures that require more of a wide angle, wide view of wide viewing area.
Yosemite or mountain or something like that.
Yeah, or let's say, even like if you want to take a picture of this kitchen sink area here, you wouldn't want to use the portrait on there. You'd probably want to use more of a landscape photography because it'll actually go and give you a wider area of focus. The portrait will give you more of that tighter part. Underneath that, you've got the flower. That's for macro photography. If you wanted to take a picture of this water bottle and get real close, get the detail or the shine from the plastic and the bubbles from the water, that's where you'd want to do it. The one below that would be the running guy. That's for speed. That's for anything that requires a faster shutter count. I probably would still recommend that you use the TV or the S button, the shutter priority. But if you are worried about that, you want the camera to just be more automatic, you can go to that one. It's a hit or miss for me on that setting. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I prefer to use the TV, and I tell students to use the TV or the shutter priority rather than using that speed icon if you have it. And then the last one is specifically night. So it'll have a little star behind the character. It's got a little white box around it, and you can see this little shoulder width character sitting on the bottom there. That is going to be good for nighttime based photography where you've got low lit or dim environment, and you want to make sure you're getting a picture that allows for the most light to hit the physical image as possible. So it really bumps the ISO up, does its best of not making it look grainy, but keeps it automatic. So
full moon or eclipse or something.
No, let's say I cut the lights in here by 30% and it was very dim. You could see me, but I wasn't necessarily exactly. You would want to maybe use that scene because then what it'll do is it'll bump the ISO on your camera up for you naturally, and it'll still take a nice picture of me without you necessarily having to jam any settings or really configure stuff.
Is that what SCN means?
SCN. Oh, that's the scene. That's just scene in general. So that is it's basically a more advanced form of auto. So some cameras will just have scene on there. Other cameras will have all of this stuff on there.
Well, I have all that stuff.
And you have scene as well
But
too.
I don't have the nighttime one.
Got it. So scene possibly could be that, but scene would more just be an advanced auto. So it's very similar to what all these do. It basically just has maybe one or two settings that it keeps within a certain number, if that makes sense.
Would that be easier to use than just the
Not
A+?
necessarily. I think the A Plus is the most simple. Most cameras don't even have this anymore. They got rid of this. Most cameras that you see nowadays are going to look more like this guy right there that I'm trying to circle with the white box. It'll literally only have the C's on there, which are customizable. You choose what you want those to be, and it'll go back every time. Bulb, manual, aperture, shutter, program, and intelligent auto. They call it now Scene Intelligent Auto because everything that your dial does there, automatic does that automatically. It's just when these were coming out, the way to dumb it down for most people and to kind of like lay it out was to make those individual things where the mom going to the game would be like, okay, let me turn it to the fast guy because my son's running track, so I want to make sure I get a good picture. People would be on vacation and they knew they were going to see the pyramids at Machu Picchu, so they would set it to the landscape setting. People knew they were going to be in the nighttime area, so they knew to set it to the nighttime setting to get better low light pictures. So Scene, Intelligent Auto, and the rest of those, they're all going to be automatic. It's just all dictated towards whatever you're trying to take a picture of to help you narrow it down better. So it can be better. Personally, I don't think so. I think that the automatic, the A Plus, is the best one to go with.
Which mine's turned on.
Still not going? Might be the might be the the cable. Maybe the cable thing that I gave you isn't the right one. I also plugged it in on that side. I know my outlet down here works, but maybe that outlet on that side isn't pumping. This is one of my favorites. This is actually a photo that a customer brought to me. They emailed me. They told me their camera doesn't work. They then came in about a week or two later, and we figured it out. It was not the camera. It was just settings that they had on there. I get this all the time where people take pictures. They come out really blurry, less than appealing. I can almost guarantee it's probably not the camera unless your camera is like 20, 30 years old.
I always thought it was the F setting, you know. I mean, if you know.
Yeah, a lot of people, they want to jump to full manual. They want to really just dive in right away, and it's like, well, of course it won't make sense if you have no background in cameras or photography. So a lot of the times when images like this come to me and people are like, I don't know what to do, it's just something as simple as, let's slow the roll down a little bit, let's stick with automatic, let's learn the camera first, and then we can get a little fancier. So your camera isn't a smartphone. Ending this class, because we still got about 30 minutes, we're going to get into some examples of ways to take a better picture, and then I'll open it up for chats. Your camera isn't a smartphone. One of the things that we were just talking about are the ability that you have with the phone to do fun stuff, to crop things out, to circle certain things, to edit the photo on the fly. But the big thing to remember with phone photos is that if you try to print this photo out, let's say you take a beautiful photo, you've got some form of publication that you're making, maybe flyers or a poster, you go to print that image, the image is going to come out very pixelated or blurry. It's not going to look right, and that's because the sensor size of the phone is so much smaller than a regular camera. When you look at a sensor size for a phone, let's say that the sensor is about the size of a dime. When you look at a physical camera, the sensor size immediately jumps up to this. It becomes wide. And then as soon as you get into full frame, the full frame sensor becomes like this. It's even bigger than the standard camera sensor size. So it's important to remember that your phone might be great to take a snapshot or to take a quick pic, but as far as getting a picture that you can do things with, print it, enlarge it, send it to friends, email it around, all of that stuff diminishes the quality, and the quality of the image that your phone can do isn't necessarily going to give you the best results, especially for sending out and doing that stuff. So your camera is going to do a much better job of that. So if there's the debate of, you know, what's better, your phone or your camera, your phone might be more convenient, but your camera in the long run of things, as long as it's not 20, 30 years old, is going to take a better picture than your phone. First thing, and I always feel goofy talking about this, but I feel like I have to, posture and the grip of which you're holding with it. Be cautious of that. Be prepared to, don't take criticism if you look funny and someone calls you out on it, because in the long run of things, not only will this help you take a better picture, but in the long run of things, this will save your back. This will save your posture. As an artist, as anything that you do with hands, you're already running the risk of getting carpal tunnel or arthritis. So hold your camera with two hands, one hand positioned underneath the camera or the lens, the other on the side where the trigger is. You should be kind of holding it like, I don't even know what the shape would be, like you're holding a precious object. That's how you should be holding your camera when you're taking pictures. As far as your,
If it's automatic, then you don't even have to hold this.
No, but it's nice, especially if you have a telephoto lens. That ability to hold the lens is then your movement with it. You both have telephoto lenses, so yeah, having that was great. The other thing too is your arms. Your arms should not be flailed out to the side. They should be underneath you to support. What I like to say is, if you take your elbows and you dig them into your rib cage, that's one way of keeping the camera stable as you're taking pictures. The other thing I like to do is with the strap, I'll keep it tight around my neck and I'll pull. When I pull, I'm making it nice and taut, and I'm actually keeping it where it's not as shaky anymore because I have it as tight as possible. With my elbows planted too, now I've really got good grip and I've got a good amount of stabilization using my neck and using my elbows as its anchor. And then the other thing is just be careful on how you lean forward and you're doing stuff. Again, you don't want to hurt the arch of your back. You don't want to give yourself more of a slumped look. Nobody wants to be the Hunchback of Notre Dame, so posture is important.
You're going to take a picture of those squirrels, makes you want to get closer, or you allow the lens to do it.
Exactly. I mean, there's always a circumstance where you might have to lean and do stuff, but in the long run of things, if your photo looks like the bottom right, if you look like the bottom right corner every time you take a picture, you're doing something wrong. Most every photo, you should look like the center picture. Every once in a while, you're going to lean back, you're going to lean forward. That's not an issue. Focus, then shoot, and shoot through the picture. I get a lot of people that when they're taking pictures, they don't understand why. They were trying to get this, they had the right settings, but they're still not hitting the mark. Focus the camera first. That's your primary goal, is in the cameras, either the screen or the viewfinder. You should see the image go back and forth, and then all of a sudden it gets nice and clear as it's blurry first. Once you see that it's clear, it's focused in, you should be pulling that trigger. When you pull the trigger, you're not looking at one item. If I'm taking a picture of this kitchen display or what's in front of us, I'm not just focusing in on the Buddha as much as I want to on this, because it may be the focal point. I need to look at the entirety of the photo and shoot through the whole image. Because if I just focus on one thing, I'm losing control of the rest of my environment. And that one photo, those two photos I took of the Buddha statue there, the Buddha might look great, but the rest of it might look off. The color might look bad. The picture might be blurry in certain aspects. It didn't focus correctly. So it's important, focus, and when you shoot through the whole image, not just one section of it. That's how you usually can get something better right off the automatic setting.
I was trying to get your YouTube, but I don't know if you can write yet.
Oh yeah, I'll pull it up for you. I'll get it up in just a second for you, absolutely, as soon as class is over. If you are the camera moving, you will get blurry photos. So stay stable, stay as focused and tight as you can. Elbows, use the strap around your neck. Those are two good lines of defense. And if worst case scenario, you really still have a hard time, look at a tripod or a monopod. Monopods are nice because you don't have to be as bulky. Tripods are a little bit tougher, but depending on what you're taking pictures of, it might be necessary. So basics of taking great photos. These are some tips and tricks that I've put together to really help boost your photo skills for whatever it is that you're taking pictures of and whatever your skill level is. So the first rule that I have is to fill the frame. We've got a simple portrait that we're taking, headshots, maybe images for a website, your LinkedIn account, whatever you got. The photo on the left shows a lot of what we're going to call this negative space. So the positive space is our model, the girl. Our negative space is everything around her. There's so much negative space going around. We see these awkward shadows coming from the wall. We can see where light's penetrating through the room. There's really no reason to have any of that. So if we can crop the rest of that out and either move the camera closer to get a better headshot of her or crop in to get rid of the rest, we're going to basically get something that's a little bit more clean, more professional, all because we're filling the frame. Now, these are all suggestions, mind you, too, so there are exceptions to this rule. If the background had something that was important, we might want to keep that in there. But the background being as boring as it is, we want to make the image more interesting. The image becomes more interesting when we put more focus on the positive subject matter, that being the girl. And we're focusing on the eyes, the hair, the jewelry. We've got nice shadows and kind of curves going on the one side of the face there. All fun stuff that we can play with based on the light and based on everything else. We don't need the rest of the room to show us any of that. Now, in this case, they're not filling the frame, but the most important thing is we're keeping the eyes in the top third of the photo. If we look on the last photo, if we broke her down into three, her eyes are just at about the line for the top third of that picture. Same thing for this one. Keeping the eyes on the top third, we've got some negative information on the bottom there. Really, the face is the primary part of the photo. The pink shirt adds a little bit of color. I would say that our eyes are most likely going to be drawn to that pink shirt right away. But naturally, as humans, we like to make eye contact with other humans. We look for the eyes. The eyes are one of the biggest things that a photographer can key in order to make sure that they're capturing the attention of their viewers. So by getting the eyes in the top third of the picture, naturally we are drawn to those, so our eyes are naturally going to raise up on the photo, and we're going to hit that top line and then descend through the photo and kind of look at everything else. Now, everybody can view these things differently, but this is just kind of a way that a lot of viewers, I would say a standard audience, would start to decipher things like images, especially when they're put up on social media or art galleries or hanging up in the office, what have you. Always focus in on the eyes if possible too. So again, going through rule of third or top thirds, eyes are on the top third of this image. We're focused in on the eyes, and if you really want to get corny with it, you've got the eyes are the gateway to the soul talk. There's that. But there's so much complexity and color going in her eyes. She has a very casual beige face. Her hair isn't anything fancy. It's a brown or a gingerish color. And she has a white garment on. So there's really nothing there either too. So the thing that's really keeping us engaged in this photo would be her eyes. Maybe the way that the hair falls in front, but it still doesn't break this intense eye contact that she has. As well too, we filled the frame. We don't have any gutter space around. We have some light coming from behind the subject matter, which we will talk about later. You get that light coming from directly behind, and we have this nice kind of breaking of light on the side of her cheek and on the one side of her hair. A couple of the strands have that extra color. So overall, we have something that's more than just a straight-on picture of her face. We have a little bit more life and a little bit more creativity to it. One of the things for kids, or for, let's say, smaller people, even animals, get on their level. When we look at a picture like this, we're shooting from above and we're shooting down at the subject matter. And there is a relative hierarchy scale when we look at things. If we look at something from below, we are above them. And by being above them, there is this kind of superiority that hits in the head a little bit. And I know that that may be stretching it a little bit, but if you're in this position and you're looking down, you might view the photo as lesser of. And in this case, given the blurriness, given the kind of the way that this picture looks, it's a kid's birthday party. You might not think anything of this. You might look at the photo and go, whatever, and then you're done with it. So that's that lesser of feeling that we're getting.
Looks like a drone picture almost.
Yeah.
Looking at high.
I always think of this as like a 90s Kodak shot. This is what your mom would have taken a picture of when all the kids and everything were sitting at the table getting ready to enjoy a cake before at Chuck E. Cheese or something like that. Or at the Park District. This looks like it's at the Forest Preserve in one of those tented areas. Now we have a similar birthday picture. Now we're on the same level. So the kid, the boy, is making eye contact with the camera. His left eye, or his right eye on our left side, so the left eye on our side, is technically in the top third of the image if you were to break it down. So his one eye is in the top thirds, but because we're more at his level, he's making eye contact with us. We have more clarity on him. We see the birthday cake, and then we've got his sister or his friend in the background having a good time, eating something, smiling. So having the ability to get on the same level of the subject matter, especially when it's kids or animals, it'll it'll really push the image and make it look a little bit more professional and clean. The other alternative to that too is to get lower than them. If you can get lower, now you're getting the subject E, the power. So when we take a picture from us going down, the viewer has all the power. And that takes a little bit more of the, let's say, pizzazz or the power away from the photo, especially if this is a cool image that we're doing or something that has meaning or volume to it. If we can then switch that and either get on the level with them, we're being equal, or if we can go lower and shoot upwards, we're getting this reverse hierarchy scale where we're putting the image up on a platform almost. We're putting the image above us, and we're below the image, giving the image its power and space in a gallery or in a show. But in this case too, if you were to take a picture of the family and you wanted to be creative with how to take a picture of the cousins or the kids or the grandkids, you might want to get lower than them, take the picture, and then that could be something you put on the fireplace mantle or somewhere else. This would be a nice picture to show off your family or friends or whatever else it is. Breaking down the rule of thirds a little bit, so we talked about having the eyes in the top third of the portion. This is what we are looking at when we break things down into thirds. So we have a top, a middle, and a bottom, or we have a left, center, and a right, all dependent on how we're looking at it and how we want to break up the thirds. There are, what's the term I'm looking for? Yeah, there's intersecting points that we're going to see on there, and we have them circled with red. Those are going to be the sweet spots. If you can get an image's main subject to hit in a sweet spot, you are going to make a more interesting photo. That's just naturally by the way that our eyes look. There's another thing that I'm thinking of that's used more commonly in the painting world. It's a swirl. You'll see it cut through and it swirls in. It utilizes the rule of thirds, but there's this pinpointing method that scientists kind of dictated when it comes to looking at artwork, where when they watch the way that our head flows and looks at stuff, we look at the things in a particular way. And if you as the photographer, the artist, can kind of pinpoint what those are, you can generally guide your viewers or your audience to look at an image the way you want them to. This is one of the ways you can do it within photography. If you can hit either in one of the sections, the top third, the middle third, or the bottom third. For eyes, they like the top third, but again, everything is expandable and you can do it any way that you choose. If you can get the subject matter in the left, the center, or the right, or if you can hit any of those red circles, your image should pop a little bit more. Some examples that I have. I'm going to throw at you another term too. We're going to talk about horizon, and we're going to talk about horizon line with foreground and background. So right off the bat, if we're looking at our rule of thirds, on our right side line, we have our surfer dude, and surfer dude's butt cuts perfectly at the circle of where everything intersects. His drop shadow also intersects at the bottom one, so he's all on the right side. We're not filling the space like we talked about in the first slide, but we don't really want to fill the space because we have this beautiful sunset sky. It's almost flawless. How clear the sky is, except for the one cloud above him. The sun is in his back, so it's behind him, so we're getting this light that comes around only slightly, that blackens out his silhouette, but we can see the tinge of orange that kind of cuts around his skin and the hair, and especially by his legs where we're getting that intense shadow. The other thing too is if we look at the rule of thirds, we can see that there is a line that hits directly where the water goes, and it almost follows that top line perfectly. That line where the sky and the water meet is called our horizon line. When we're doing art or we're drawing, we always see a horizon line. Our horizon line is our dictation for whether we are below below or above a certain object. When we look at the countertop over there, do we see the top of it or do we see the bottom of it? That's the question of the horizon line. If we were a little bit lower on the horizon line, we would have more information going up in the air. Where the horizon line would be higher up. Now let's say we could see the top of our surfer's head, the horizon line would be significantly lower and we would have a much different viewpoint. So the way that I look at it is if this is the horizon line and you're the viewer, if we're looking dead on it, this is where we're going to be. If the horizon line's up, we're looking up. And so therefore we're seeing the bottom of whatever the object is. If the horizon line is at our center again, we're seeing it dead on, and if it's below us, we're looking down, so we're seeing the top of that horizon line. So with this one, we have a hierarchy scale going up, so we're pointing the camera upwards at our subject matter, and then we have our rule of thirds hitting right now too, plus some of the other things that we've talked about in the other slides. So it's just ways and tricks to make the image look more appealing, even if it's something as simple as this guy standing on the beach.
If he's moving, do you sometimes anticipate him being in a spot that will be center cut horizon?
You could, absolutely, you could. But then at the same time, with having the person dead set in the middle, you've got all this negative space on your left and your right. Now you have the subject matter in the middle. It still is interesting, but it might not feel quite the same.
You might want to crop it, yeah.
Exactly, but if you have them positioned off to the right or off to the left a little bit, you're not taking away from the main subject for whatever that is, but you're also telling a much larger story that's going on. So, the surfer guy is our most interesting part of this, but our surfer guy is only as interesting as the beautiful sunset and beach that surrounds him, so that sort of thing. So it's taking in the environment with that and figuring out the nice median in between the two. Beach photos are all the rage with this rule of thirds, let me tell you. Another beach photo. Now we've got our girl on the left. We've got an overcast day, so we've got some sun breaking through the clouds, but the photo's in black and white, so it really doesn't matter in this case either. Another version of the hierarchy scale, because when we look at the water, we can see how far back the horizon line goes, and we can see that we're kind of pointed up, so the girl is a little bit higher than our horizon line. She is on the hierarchy scale positioned above us. You've got light breaking through the clouds, which gives a little bit more information to the thing. But again, she is hitting that on the left side, those two center intersecting lines. So we have more information on not only the beach, but on the girl. Just makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. Now this is a double breaking point or double cross. So we've got our rule of thirds going on. We've got the brother and the sister holding hands perfectly on the one. The only thing that drives me nuts is I wish mom and dad were a little bit more to the right and they were holding hands the same way, and then that center line would be hitting too. But regardless, they're both basically on the rule of thirds axis lines. We can also kind of see where the grass goes into the background, so we can see that form of hierarchy scale kind of going through. But both are breaking on their points of the rule of thirds. And then a classic, I took the screenshot from The Office. The Office really did these interview scenes perfectly. The reason they don't, what I always say is, number one, they've got their rule of thirds. They break the character on the one side so that it's on the intersecting lines. And if you watch The Office, you're familiar with these interview scenes. The eyebrows are basically in the top third. So for the majority of it, you're gonna basically have the eyes in the top third. It's almost there. It's basically there. But I would say the biggest point is that you're hitting on the different parts of the rule of thirds there. Not filling the space might seem silly, but in the context of this show and what they're going for, they want to really show that it's an office space. So by not cutting in and making him dead center on there, you see the shrubbery on the one side, so you know that they're in the conference room. You see the shutters on the one side, so again, it gives it this space that we're in an office building while they're doing this. So again, contextualizing the space. Same thing you would probably do if you were in front of like the pyramids. You would take a picture, but you'd want to make sure you get the pyramids in the background so that way you can see that information. Vice versa, let's say you're in front of this beige wall, you probably want to crop in a little bit more so that you don't have all this beige wall with this person. And then I mentioned it before, but the sun on your back. So both of these images are the same. They're both basically taken at the same exact time. The only difference is that in the top one, he's not opening himself up. There's no sun really radiating through his back area. He's got the fish in front, and there's this really bad, ugly drop shadow. When we get to the bottom one, there's no extra exposure compensation, there's no flash, there's nothing else. He's dropped his shoulder a little bit. He's got sun pouring over the side of him, so you get his face to light up a little bit. His hat is positioned upwards more, so we're getting more sun that's coming from the back to illuminate the face. And the other big thing that I always say is the fish. The fish naturally has scales. The scales have natural reflection to them. That sun's coming off the back, off his shoulder, reflecting off the fish, lighting him up, but then also giving light towards the fish. So it's important that when you're taking a photo, don't scrunch yourself up. Don't be afraid of the sun. If you keep the sun at your back as the subject matter, you're naturally going to get more of this overtaking light that will help the overall complexity and the lighting of the photo look a lot better and look a lot more lively.
I know better, I say it as a flash because his teeth shine, the fish shines.
Yep.
So you have a lot of things that are not brought out on the fish, so.
Exactly. And the last thing that I always do like to talk about is there are apps on your phone that are designed to work with the cameras. As a beginning photographer, if you've never used one, or even as an experienced photographer, if you've used one, try it out. Most of these cameras have it. I'd be surprised. Yours might have it. I think yours is too old to have it, unfortunately. But within the last 10 years, they've had that technology on there.
A 10-second or 15-second
Timer, but even an app. So the app to do the Wi-Fi Bluetooth transfer of the photos, and then also to use the app as a timer itself. You can do it where I've done it before, where I set my camera up on my phone. I hit the 10-second timer. I walk in front of it, and then I do a picture of myself for whatever reason. No,
It's got a timer on it, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have,
no app connectivity on there.
no Wi-Fi ability.
Yeah, usually I want to say it started in like 2012, 2013, maybe 2010 is the earliest, and then from that point on.
Yeah, I think the one I have didn't have it, but like, I could have gotten just like a step better.
And they would have had that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Okay.
With the camera, do you have like, if I was at a wedding and you can have the bride or in your head, or you can have it 2 shots in one, is that like?
Oh,
what
you're
I'm talking
like
about?
double exposure?
Yeah, right.
You can find some cameras will still have that feature on there. Yours might. It's all dependent on the camera. So I know right now one of the popular like travel cameras that people are buying are the Olympus cameras. It's a micro 4/3 sensor, so it's a smaller sensor size than Canon or Nikon. But what's cool about them is that there's a lot of really fun customizable features on there, and one of them is the double exposure. So when you're taking a picture, you can take one picture and it'll basically expose the image with enough information on there that when you point and then take another picture, it'll double expose. So I could take a picture of you and then basically overlap it with a picture of you, and you both would be on the same image, but then you'd basically be crossing each other. It would look really cool.
It'd be like my wife and my baby, and then I'll have a picture of me, so it might be, on your head
Yeah.
or the background. or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
exactly.
that.
A lot of people love to do that, and that was really popular. That was a very popular way of doing those like family portrait shots, especially in the late 70s, early 80s. They started doing a lot of that for like the household foot pictures and stuff. And yeah, now you see a lot of digital cameras that can do the same thing
I
too.
said that you were 20, so I thought maybe you weren't old enough to see that.
Oh, I know all about that stuff.
Okay.
But using the apps, using all this different stuff, use your timer, play with the different features on there. Again, it gives you more control over the camera, it gives you more like fun, accessibility, all these different features that you can use. Last thing I'll recommend is some of the recommended accessories that I would say to start anybody that comes in that's on a budget, you need a camera, you need a lens, you need an SD card, you need a strap. Only 4 things that you need to get started with it. Camera will come with a battery. If you buy a body only, you need a lens, you need a memory card to store everything, and then most every new camera you buy will come with a strap or a hand strap, depending on the model. I can't stress enough that I think extra batteries and extra memory cards should be the other thing in your budget that you should be buying immediately when you get a camera. Again, always have 2 memory cards in case one dies, but the batteries are too far in between for not having one.
That's my problem.
I looked at a couple years ago. I went to DC and I was so excited. It was my first time, and I brought 3 or 4 camera batteries. I left 3 of them in the little hotel or Airbnb I was staying, and I only had 1 with me. And I went to Arlington, and Arlington was gorgeous. The cemetery was amazing, quiet, peaceful. I brought my camera. I was taking pictures. I mean, I take a lot of photos. So at about the 1200th photo mark, when I was in Arlington, my camera died. And it was only 11 a.m. and I was like, oh crap, now I gotta, oh no, I gotta go all the way back to my hotel, get another battery, get the other one on the charger, and then I gotta go back. So it was all this running around where if I would have just kept another battery in my back pocket, it would have been fun.
You did John F. Kennedy Cemetery?
I did, yeah.
Yes, I got it.
All
Yeah.
gorgeous, all gorgeous. It was great.
It's awesome.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was
Does
beautiful.
ABT so?
We should. Yeah, we should have all those guys, especially for these models, because none of them are discontinued. And the Rebel and the D7500, 8500.
D60. That's what it is.
D60. Oh, okay, yeah. We might not have any for you. We might though. Yours we should definitely have for the Rebel, because they still make the same battery type for the newer Rebels, so everything should still be there.
How often do you use your camera? Is it just when you got
I use it quite often, but just, I don't experiment with it. It's like point and shoot, you know.
Do you do weddings of friends, or do you do any
No,
nature?
I do some nature, but I think basically vacation.
Everyone's got to have one in the group. Got to be the
Cameraman.
it's the professional vacation photographer. Every group's got to have one.
See, because I don't wanna be in any of the pictures.
You don't
I like
you
that.
don't like your
That's
picture?
good.
Mm-mm.
I have no problem with people taking my picture. I love being behind the camera. I have very great memories of my great grandfather having like the Super 8 camera out when we had like family parties, and he would sit there and record everything. And how we've got this giant bin full of Super 8s that he's never in any of the pictures. He's always behind the camera. And there's that like idea of just capturing those memories and those little things that have always inspired me with this. Because for one, I'm a painter and a drawer, so my art skills are towards something else. I've never considered myself a photographer, but I love the idea of cameras, and I love what they can do and how they can inspire. So I'm like, oh, I'm a big fan.
My wife was, she didn't like herself in pictures till I started taking it with a Nikon camera, and she's very photographic. But like you said, everyone's different, you know, so.
No, I'm behind the camera,
That's it.
and that's,
Your mother's shy too, or is she, your parents, you know?
my mom wasn't, she didn't mind having a picture too, but I just don't like it.
Everyone's different.
Remember those Polaroid ones, 60 seconds, you pull it out.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you get the picture back.
They still make those guys. They still make them.
It's probably because there aren't too many pictures of me as a little kid.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That could be why I don't like being in pictures.
It all stems. A lot of the things that in our mind, I know, stem from when we were kids, because we have so many traumas or so many things happened when we were kids that we might not remember them now, but they still affect us in the long run of things. So it's incredible. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, extra battery, extra memory card. I do the Chicago Polar Plunge every year. I volunteer. I do the photos and the video for it. Lens cleaning kits have saved my butt so many times. I've gotten just garbage on the lens and just spray, rub off real quick, clean it up. So lens cleaning kits, definitely recommend. Tripod if you need it. Again, everyone's a little different with that. If you don't want to lug that stuff around, don't worry about it. But if you're doing nature, if you're doing anything outdoors, you should definitely get either a carbon fiber or an aluminum-based tripod. Get the lightest one you can. If you've never tried it, try it one time. It'll make a huge difference for photos, especially if you're shaky or anything else. A lot of the times a tripod is a big upgrade to the photo game. External hard drives, if you don't like cloud-based solutions, get various filters. If you're shooting, I would recommend just doing a standard UV filter. It'll reduce the harmful rays the sun can put out. It's not going to help you protect your eyes or do anything goofy, but it will protect if there's like a goofy ray of light coming through. It'll help not allow that light to go prism based. It'll basically allow for the light to be there's a term I'm looking for, but yeah, if you're experiencing harsh light coming in photos and the light affects the color aspect of the actual photo, a filter usually can fix that. Polarizing filters really cut through bad sunlight. Neutral density cuts through both polarizing and a standard UV, and it gives you the ability to change the density of that blockage of light. That's pretty nice. Additional lenses are always worth getting or looking into. And then the last thing is classes and workshops. Join clubs. I have one lady who comes in all the time. She's one of my favorites. She's got to be in her 60s, 70s. She's retired. She joined a club at the Botanical Gardens. She meets with 20 other people, and they basically compete against each other to see who gets the best photograph. So they all take pictures, then they edit, they do all their stuff, and they have a big show like every month at the Botanical Gardens. They don't pay anything for it. They don't do anything. Whoever wins, their picture gets put in the main booklet they put out all the time for the Botanical Garden. And it's really cool. Like, her work is phenomenal. I've never seen people that photograph like she has.
I don't know if the magazine still takes pictures, but Life magazine
Yeah.
in the 30s and 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
So I mean,
There's a group that is at O'Hare. They have special access to go on the runway, and they actually get to go to there's a viewing area on the runway where they take pictures of the planes taking off and landing, and their shots are gorgeous. I have one guy who comes in to pick up some extenders and some telephoto lenses, and he showed me some of their work. It's really cool.
I think Top Gun, they took them off.
Yeah.
That's real cool how they.
There's so many different clubs and crews and people that you can be a part of with that stuff. So I recommend it if you can take classes like mine or online or anything else. The more information you can get when playing with the camera, the better off you'll always be. And other than that, that's all I got for you guys. So thanks for everybody online for staying on. King of Arcade, anytime. I appreciate you for being on. And AK, hello again. But thank you guys for showing up in class. It helps me stay awake during class. Otherwise, I get sleepy.
So next week?
Yes, next week is going to be intermediate. So it'll be the same time, 5:30 to 7. Next week is going to be a little bit longer. So we'll start at 5:30 because we go through exposure, exposure compensation, ISO, shutter, and I'm drawing a blank, aperture. So we'll break down the triangle, the exposure triangle. We'll talk about additional lenses, how focal length plays a point into all that. We get into more of the nitty-gritty parts of, now you're done with automatic, you've graduated, now you want to learn how you really control all the different things on the camera to take a clean photo.
Well, can you do keep it on auto and add different lenses?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you can do all that. Yeah. That one I'm not. That one. So the lenses, when we talk about that, we're gonna talk about everything else before, but the lenses at the very end when we start talking about that in the next class, that can be done with just automatic. So you don't have to necessarily, if you're throwing another lens on there, set anything on there. You're just putting the lens on. The kind of the way that we structure this is the intro is like, I just bought or I'm ready to buy a camera. What do I need to know? You need to know how to use automatic, and you basically just need to know how to frame things up and take a clean picture. Intermediate, we really get into the details of okay, you're done with automatic. Now you want to do a shutter-based priority photo or an aperture priority-based photo. That's where we talk about that sort of thing.
And then what's the next class?
So we skip the third Thursday of every month, and I think there's 5 Thursdays this month, so we'll be skipping 2 Thursdays.
Oh.
Let me pull up my schedule. So for everybody online, March 9th is going to be our next class, and then our last class of the month will be March 30th. March 30th is drones. So I usually don't have my people for my photo classes come to that. I teach people how to fly the drones,
Oh, okay.
use cameras on the drones, and how to film.
So you only have 2 classes for the camera?
Intro and intermediate.
Okay.
And then after that, I tell people that the Thursdays that I don't teach a class, I'm here till 6 or 7 o'clock in the store every day. So those are my days where if you really have a question that I didn't hit during class, bring your camera into the store, and then I could talk to you on the floor about it downstairs, and we can go through. And if there's another lens you want to see on there, we can pop a lens on the camera. But if there's something specific where you're like, okay, this setting, how do I fix this, or how do I change this? That's when I tell people to come in for those.
What time the store opens?
We open up every day at 9 a.m.
Okay.
My only days off are Tuesday, Wednesdays. I don't think I threw that up on there. Yeah, I'm off Tuesday, Wednesdays of every week, but then I'm here literally throughout the whole week, and I'm usually not in the mornings. I don't like being here in the mornings. I like being here basically through the close. Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, so what time do you usually get here?
I'd say about 10 a.m.
10?
10 a.m.
So you're here from 10 till 7?
Yes, 10 to close, usually every day.
Well, no, Thursdays work for me, because I only get my vehicle once a week. When you have a teenager, you have to,
You're I know.
Is it a girl or boy?
girl,
You got to plan it all out.
yeah, she's going off to college next year. Oh, God.
So then you'll have your car.
They hope Biden has no student loans, pay off her student loans, and
Well,
because I had,
yeah, we haven't even started with the student loans. We're trying to get her out of private school right now.
Where she go to school?
Minors.
Oh, okay, yeah. I went to Notre Dame and Niles. So yeah, I remember all that game. Where's she looking at school?
Well, she wants to be an astrophysicist.
wow. Purdue University sounds like.
No, she doesn't want to do Indiana, because she has a cousin who is graduating from Butler. She doesn't want any Indiana schools. She doesn't want any Michigan schools, because she's got her other cousin who goes to Hope College in Michigan. So she preferably would like to go to the Illini,
Okay.
because she needs to be close to home.
Yeah.
But she's applied to 11 schools. She got accepted to University of New Mexico, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Penn State, MIT Amherst, Florida Tech, and there's Embry-Riddle
Okay.
in Florida and Daytona. That's just aerospace. That's
Okay.
like,
So is that probably the cream
Is
of
it
the
her
crop?
grades?
That's what she
Is
wants
it
the
her
most.
grades that dictate, or is it just?
I think it's her grades, the career she wants. She's a female, and it's STEM.
Yeah.
Because my son went to Oakland Community, get the basics done, and
It's
then,
a-
I mean, it won't cost you so much.
We've tried to tell her, if she goes to Oakton or Harvard, she can get basics and then go somewhere.
Yeah,
A lot of her friends are,
rich, probably.
well, they're rich, but they're also they're nasty. I remember growing up, kids are not nice. And they ridicule her because she's thinking about, just staying home for a couple of years, getting her basics. I'm like, you know how much money we'd save? I took